Hey everyone. You know that big beautiful bill may wind up governing how we use AI? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Welcome back. Happy Wednesday to you. I have to apologize. I'm a little under the weather. It was a tough weekend. I had some kind of thing going on. But we're here and we are moving forward. I hope your Memorial Day weekend, if you celebrated it in the US anyway, was good. And we've got a full lineup here today. Let me introduce you quickly to our gang members and we'll jump right into it. First of all, he's from Futurum Invisible Impact, where he's principal analyst and co founder, and our friend Guy Curry. Guy, how are you?
Good, good. Joining y'all from Austin, Texas.
Good to see you back home. Speaking of home, he's the man from the north now, with official uh, uh, with official duties as well. But he's our cybersecurity expert, Chris Blask. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Love it to be here.
Thanks for being on. And then finally, he's up in the Bronx, loving this winning streak the Yankees seem to be on. They're getting their mojo going. He's our chief content officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
And it's going great. And of course, it's not enough to win. Everybody else has to lose. So far, so good.
Yeah. But who would have thought a guy named Yarborough and a guy named Warren were going to be two of our top pitchers?
Who would have thought, man? Minor league system.
All this time, Alan, I thought your voice was gone because you were screaming for the Knicks. Yeah.
No, I wish it was, but no, it was a tough weekend for me.
I'll say a note for the Texas Stars, the AHL hockey team here based in Austin, Texas, that just advanced to the semis in the for the cup, whose name I don't even know in hockey.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's jump into it, Mike. So we've got this big, beautiful bill winding its way through Congress. Of course, the Senate has got bunch of senators have their knives and forks out ready to chop up this bill. Or maybe add more to it. You're right. What do we got?
So the deal, though, is that tucked into this big, beautiful bill that covers a million different things is a provision that says that states will be banned from having their own AI regulations for 10 years, which by the time I got around to regulating anything would mean that it was pretty much moot at that point. It seems like a power grab on the part of the federal government with the aid of some folks in the House of Representatives. We'll see what the Senate has to say about this and whether it makes it through. But, on the one hand, Alan, might make sense for us to have a national AI strategy. But on the other hand, if this is just enshrining in the law that we won't have an AI strategy, what's the point?
Look, there's so much nonsense and crap packed into this bill that I almost want to say this AI piece of it is small potatoes compared to some of the other fascist agenda that's in there. And if we had a normal administration that plays by the rules and norms of society and humanity, it may not be a bad idea. But when you have an administration that is out for their own personal wealth accumulation, right? And you've got what we've seen going on here with self-dealing and violations of the emoluments clause and so forth. I am hesitant to put anything solely into the hands of our federal government. I didn't see anything in the Constitution about AI rights. But, clearly in the Constitution, anything not taken by the federal is reserved to the states. It'll be interesting to see if the Senate swallows this. Because, it's not just that all states and local administrations are forbidden from having any regulation or any policy at all. It's also that they're socking away hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, hundreds, for AI over these next couple of years. Now, is that money going to wind up in the Trump family library on the Qatari plane that he's getting? Is it going to end up in the UAE AI Center or some other country that agrees to have a Trump building? Let's face it, this whole thing is, I mean, how we, I'm speechless, right? In another time, in another place, I'd welcome a coherent AI strategy. But this is not a coherent AI strategy. This is everybody be quiet and let the pigs feed at the trough.
So, Guy, you're in Texas, and are they going to sign off on this? Because let me posit it this way. Let's say 4 years from now, there's another election and somebody else is in charge of the White House. And now they got a 6-year run of AI policy that they can go with. And the states have no say, regardless of what color they are, red or blue.
Well, so I have two thoughts about this off the bat. First of all, I agree with Alan. Let's put policy in scare quotes. If there's a policy behind these kinds of proposals, and a lot of the big beautiful BBB bill, that policy is allowed, for, you can call it grift, bribery, corruption, whatever you want to call it. Just enable that. Concentrate decision making, among individuals whose personal loyalty to each other dictates whether they get to feed at the trough, as you say. So that's my first thought. That's not really a policy. There's no policy here. My main reaction was that this reminds me a lot of auto regulation, where there was no, there never has been any ban on states having their own regulations. So effectively, California, which steadily turned blue and is now pretty, democratic and democratically run, dictates a whole lot of the compliance that automotive manufacturers adhere to, simply because it's such a big market that carving out California alone for example, emission standards doesn't make sense. So they just apply the emission standards everywhere. So I felt like this was just a preemptive strike against something like that, where there might be no AI regulation at all on a federal level, but just as the state of Texas and I think Florida and some other states banned TikTok on their own or whatever, I don't remember the details of that. They want to avoid, they being, the grifters and the federal government want to avoid states doing anything. Why do they want to do that? I think between AI and crypto, the so-called oligarchs, or the billionaires with free money to spend on whatever, have essentially worked what they can to buy off central decision making in the U.S. Federally, and they have been making a lot of arguments, and they're doing it in the UK as well, that AI should not be regulated in any way at all and should not have to pay for the copyrighted material that it uses to get trained and all of those sorts of things. So it's kind of the old story new again. I almost feel like we're going back to the days of the Roman Republic here in the US, at least temporarily.
More
I don't think
empire guy, not the Roman Republic, the empire.
Well, okay, fair enough. Potato. We can discuss that later. And your point being my point, which is it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you've been entrusted with, it's what you can get away with. So this is another example of that. I really think it's like the automotive and the emission standards. They just don't want states to, especially big states, to have any influence at all, so that nobody can have any influence.
Now, Chris, around the world, these centralized authority typically has this right anyway. I mean, it's kind of unique to the United States. And in Canada, for instance, if it's not in the Constitution, it's assumed to be the responsibility of the federal government. Here in the United States, it's the opposite. If it's not in the Constitution, it's assumed to be the responsibility of the states. But I think every other country is much more like Canada. So our friends around the globe probably wondering what the heck we're debating here.
Yeah, so there's a classic joke that's been floating around, the IT space, probably even through the internet, and it keeps getting into, it's about, shooting yourself in the foot in different programming languages. I think most people are familiar with that one. In and so forth. And this to me seems exactly the same. Like, this is America shooting itself in the foot. Because as you said, Alan, again, I can understand this at the federal level, because this is highly evolving space and critical and existential threatish economically and all sorts of other ways. However, one of the great things that the states has always had going for us is the 50 experiments. States' rights. Let's try a bunch of different things all at the same time. Agree or don't agree, move through it fast. It's been one of the things keeping America at the head of the pack. Some from Else's comments, just structurally, technically, competitively, to say that we are going to stop, one of our big advantages. We're going to stop states from acting like American states and have them act like Canadian, Russian, and Chinese provinces, that they just, subsumed in this wall and we will compete. This is not, again, throwing things away. Russian made those wealthy and strong in the most important evolving area of the game. Does these retroactively somehow turn out to be a good idea? I guess that's physically possible. We'll see.
Alan, do you think that this is tucked into this big, beautiful bill in the hopes that no one's going to notice?
I think there's, as I said earlier, this is small potatoes to what's tucked into this big, beautiful bill. Look, and now, to be fair, the Republicans don't have a monopoly on this kind of nonsense. It's always, these bills always get packed in with pork barrel and all kinds of stuff. But I've seen reports of some of the things that are tucked into this bill, and it's enough to make your toes curl. I mean, it's just another step towards an authoritarian government. And quite frankly, I don't blame the executive. He is what he is. But I do blame the yellow belly people in Congress who are going to sit down and lay down here and let this happen to our country. I'm sorry if that's a little too partisan for you, but that's pretty much how I feel.
We don't know that will happen yet. We know that
Well, we know the House of Representatives.
the House of it's going to the Senate now. It seems to me, to do my own political analysis, it seems to me extremely likely that it will pass in some form. I wonder if they'll hit their deadline. They also have the very important matter of going on vacation to consider. And I rather wonder if it takes, I think it would take 4 Republicans or something like that it's a little confusing, because normally they'd have to pass filibuster. They'd have to make certain changes in order for it not to, who knows. It's a little confusing. Also, one gets the feeling that, another norm will break it, or if it's a norm, rule, whatever, will break at some point. I just think that they're going to do anything they can to pass it. And they won't change it too much, and it will pass. It will pass with dispatch, because otherwise they'll have nothing to say that they did, essentially. And if they don't pass it now, then they pass it closer to election season, and it's going to be a black mark on them. So I do think you're probably right, Alan, but it's not for certain yet. The Senate might make some changes for the better.
Alan, does this go to the Supreme Court as a test of just where the line is between what the federal government is allowed to do and what states control? I mean, who said that?
Well, I don't believe so. I think if the federal government legislates, it preempts state legislation. This is, it's not a states' right issue. This is Congress abdicating its responsibility to be an equal branch of government here and putting a check and balance on the executive branch. There's another aspect of this bill, though, we haven't discussed, and I think it's also important, is that this bill clearly favors big tech. So you're going to have the same old, same old. You're going to have the Meta, Google, Apple, whatever, the Mag 7, right? Riding triumphant here. But there's real, in a new thing like AI, you would hope to see a million flowers sprouting, a million new growth trees sprouting to harness this new advantage and look at different ways of doing it to compete. Instead, we'll look for the competition to come from China, maybe Europe, right? Because we're not encouraging, with this bill, we're not encouraging growth at a grassroots level. This, if you don't have enough money to grease El Duce's palm, you don't get to play in this game. And
Oh, yeah, and it's even worse. It's even worse because the Supreme Court looks ready to overturn about 90 years of precedent at some point soon. I think the case is called Hubble. I'm not sure. It's an FDR era case where the Supreme Court ruled that the president can't willfully fire members or leaders of so-called independent agencies, board members, and it looks very close to being overturned, which means that among other things, the president could fire the commissioners at the FTC. So if the commissioners at the FTC serve at the will of a president, what does the FTC do? Among many other things, the FTC allows companies to give licenses and allows companies, especially in the case of disputes, to continue trading, continue doing commerce. And one of those could be Apple. And if Apple has not given a plane or a boat or several solid gold iPhones or whatever lately, the president could say to the heads of the Federal Trade Commission, I want you to start procedures to sanction and sue Apple, which then Apple would have to deal with, or I want you to de-license Apple for export or whatever it might be. And if they can be fired at any time by the president asking that, then they're more likely to go along. If they don't, they'll be fired, and someone who will go along be put in their place. So it's about to get worse if that does go in that direction. All we can hope for is to slow it down long enough to put more proper checks and balances in its place. This is all part of a piece, which is this unitary executive theory, but also the essential authoritarian theory, which is that people want strong men, usually it's men, strong men in charge, because that makes everything and everybody stronger. I don't believe in that at all, but I think that's a general belief.
So ultimately, we're going to see more AI executives doing photo ops in Mar-a-Lago, standing next to the president while they drop off large bags of cash in the back room. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, I told you, like the Star Trek episode where they built a society based upon the Al Capone book. That's where we're going. That's where we're going. All right, let's take a break here while I pack my bags. We could come back. Let's talk about something maybe not as politically contentious. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Hey, folks, we're back. I'm not sure this is going to be less contentious, but it probably won't be as political. How's that? But Java has turned 30, and I don't know, Guy, thinking back in the time when Java first came on the scene, I don't think I thought about it as kind of this language we were going to live with forever, but here we are. I mean, there's more programming languages than ever, but it seems like everybody's still using pretty much Java.
Everybody is using Java, at least in the enterprise. I suppose there are good parallels with COBOL, which originated in the mainframe era and continues to be used in mainframes to this day. But I think better. I would raise that, by by one, which is that Java, thanks to the Java compilers and Java virtual machine, is much more portable. It's scalable. It has security capabilities. It's resilient. Java, the language, I wouldn't, I don't care for personally. I'm not really into C or C derived languages at all. That's just my personal preference. And the theory of writing in a particular language is not the point here. It's the platform that's the point. The Java virtual machine. I mean, so Mike, I'm also maybe just barely old enough to remember when the Java virtual machine originated as a way to run Java applications on your desktop. I mean, that was the whole idea, was to gain interactivity with portable apps that you could find at a website or somewhere else and just run on your desktop. It morphed. I mean, the whole thing got sort of revolutionized with a recognition that you could put agents into servers or full-blown applications into servers using the Java virtual machine. Is almost like a primitive, extremely primitive a predecessor to the container. So I celebrate Java's anniversary personally. I don't care what language you're programming in, but I do care about mobility, portability, and scalability, and all sorts of things. And I also care about not wasting time on trying to recode or refactor or re-whatever applications that run perfectly well. And I think that there are many, many homegrown applications or OpenShift-based applications or what have you using Java and the Java virtual machine. There's no there, in other words. But Java has its detractors. And I think mostly that has to do with it not being cloud native on its own. It's being sort of old and legacy. To me, the main critique or the critiques boil down to vibes, which is Go is cooler, Rust is cooler, that's old fashioned, that kind of thing. I think if there's a talent issue involved, that could be something. But there seem to be plenty of Java programmers out there, just like there are plenty of .NET programmers out there. If it's boring, that's not necessarily a bad thing for IT and for the enterprise.
I always appreciate those mainframe modernization conversations where it's basically, let's replace a 50-year-old language with a 30-year-old language because that's going to make a huge amount of difference. But Chris,
Well, hey, listen, VMs run on mainframes, Java VMs run on mainframes, and those Java applications can port over to mainframes. But yeah, go ahead.
with a little work and about a 6 to 9 months worth of effort. Chris, there one big criticism of Java in my mind is the security aspect of this. And it's a language that is 30 years old and it is prone to have a lot of security flaws in it. And there is an argument for moving to things like Rust that are fundamentally more secure. It's harder probably to program in Rust, especially if you've known Java for 30 years. But do you think maybe there's a time and place where our security concerns will finally maybe push us to think about a different language?
Maybe, right? But you touched on a couple of the factors thing, right? If it is harder to do something in the new one you're replacing the old with, then, does that make it less secure intrinsically? And I'm not saying in a talk show like this, I can answer that. You actually have to think through these things really clearly to give you an actual answer. I leave the fact that Guy, you went there with the main things, because as I think about this topic, I loved, in the teens working with Unisys and realizing that mainframes are still out there. The entire global economy is being run by code that was written by Grace Hopper, before, the dawn of time, and it's running on mainframes that are really just Intel, large clusters of Intel servers, running emulation software, that's nesting all this, 700-year-old code that actually works just fine. And I think that's, when you get into security, these obvious answers just aren't. Let's go to the new thing. It is actually more secure. Will that make us more secure? Maybe not. So it's a fascinating topic. Every time this comes up, there's a newer, better, faster. And I can sit here and say, looking at just that component, yes, that is a more secure way to do things. Now, if you actually replace that in the real world in real places, that depends. People, humans, processes, economics, It bloody depends.
Alan, will we be here for the 50th anniversary of Java? What do you say?
Yeah, the B-52s are still flying, so I'm listening.
So I think one of the real concerns and criticisms about Java is Oracle's ownership of it. I think that's. I mean, there's what is it? Open JDK or whatever. There's some open source alternatives. As with all open source, you got to think DIY at the same time. That it tends to be complex. Even if you have a service provider or somebody you're paying to make it less complex for you, there's this, fly by night aspect to doing, an open version of Java. So your best bet is to pay the licensing fees to Oracle and continue that way. And that is probably not a great thing for the industry as a whole. I'm not sure why Oracle hasn't open sourced Java.
Well, I could tell you why. It's not who they.
I think it's a sound business decision to do that, but
They
you
never
tell us
got the
why.
open source piece of it. That MySQL. So here's my take on this. So from day one, almost, Java's been the language everyone hates or loves to hate. It was always, the promise of it. And, when it first came out, it was Sun. And for many of us of a certain age, Sun represented what was good in computing, right? They were supporters of open source. They did have cutting edge technology. They moved the needle and they seemed that it was a good company. But even back then, the idea of the right once, run everywhere, and this was going to be the new thing that replaces everything, there were always, doubters out there. When it got sold to Oracle, the tide really turned against it. Even though it kept being popular, even though
It's like
how much
80% enterprises have it. In what way does that mean? Is that indicating a tide turning against it?
well, the tide of public opinion. It was old, it was slow, it was insecure, it wasn't open source. Oracle's an evil empire. You can't trust them with it. You know, are they updating it? And all the new ones, as you mentioned, there were always, I don't want to call them ankle biters. They were more than ankle biters. There was a definite tide of people that were anti-Java for many different reasons. But here we are at 30 years old. Guy, as you say, 70 to 80% of organizations still use it in some form or another, in some capacity. And it might, to your point, in 50 years, they still will too. And Oracle, yes, they have it open source, that they're not good stewards of open source. This is the same thing with MySQL and why we have such a strong Postgres community. They're not, stewards of open source projects, that I'm sorry to say. But they do keep it current, right? They do update it. And, Java's dead, long live Java.
Yeah. I would say the pace of innovation in Java's accelerated in the last 2 years or so, and a lot of that has to do with the open source contributors to that effort and Oracle itself. But if you look at what they're doing, a lot of what they're doing essentially is borrowing the better ideas from other programming languages and moving them into Java faster, which is fine. We've seen that model before. It's kind of similar to what Microsoft does with Windows, and for a certain class of customers, that works just fine. But to me, the biggest issue is just simply inertia. I don't think, for all the developers who say that they will write in other programming languages, they all have a favorite. And I think every CIO knows that it's easier for them to go find a Java developer than it is any other developer. And then the whole thing just starts to self-perpetuate, because now the only people I'm hiring are Java developers, so we keep using Java.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that a lot of times, including on this show, I almost feel like it's a part of the developer culture, which is, uh, you know, a builder culture. And so when we see, that's the main way I've always explained how many languages there are out there and how many new ones keep popping up, whether derivatives or brand new ones. It's almost like, a certain, a certain mindset says this language isn't quite doing everything I want it to do. It could be just as simple as memory allocations, or it could have to do with mobility or whatever it is, something sort of more under the hood rather than the syntax of the language. And so they instead of writing the code using what they have, they create a new language, um, and Python was one of the greatest examples. The best Python it was sort of a basic successor. It was just easy, an easy to learn and use language, suitable in multiple environments. And then somehow, almost by chance, it became the language for AI development. Why not? But you can use any language that suits you. I happen to love Perl. I think it's elegant and cool, and it gives me a thrill to use it. I really think it's the platform that's the question, the Java platform. I'm not familiar with if there are ways to write in other languages for the Java platform. The Java platform is where the security vulnerabilities are, but the Java platform is also where this nice integration with various kinds of enterprise infrastructure and enterprise platforms makes it scalable, reliable, that sort of thing. So long live Java. Java is dead. Long live Java.
It's funny, in the age of AI, I was talking to somebody this weekend and I said, how's your job changing? He said, well, I'm not actually writing more code. I'm reading more code. And the code is written by the machine, but he has to understand how the code was created by the machine. But I don't know if AI will result in us adopting to other programming languages because it might become easier, or if the barrier to taking on something different drops. But certainly in the nature of being a developer and a Java developer is going to change.
Like every developer. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and discuss our third block today. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and we're going to have a little chat about, post-quantum cryptography and encryption. There's a report out from our friends over at DigiCert, and depending on your perspective, the glass is either half full or half empty, but they noted that only 5% of folks are currently using quantum safe encryption, but we don't know when Q-Day is coming, which is when quantum computers might actually break the encryptions we have, but a lot of people feel like it's going to be sooner than later. Chris, is this one of these kind of slow-moving crises that we can see coming, and yet we won't do anything about it till it gets here because we're just too busy?
Oh, I don't know that really, but privacy, security, and particularly privacy and secrecy is not time, right? One of the things that one of the ways security people like explaining this to normal humans is talking about blank faults and so forth. Like, this is a felted, needle felted Pegasus my youngest child Terry made for me, and I can use this. I can get through any bank vault on Earth. All I need is time. I can just go to the metal until the metal is gone, and I can walk through. All this encryption we've been using, we talked about this in another episode a month or two ago on that show. All this encryption we've been using since the dawn of time gives you a certain amount of time to keep your secrets. That's it. You can build pyramids, you can build chambers. It just increases the amount of time to get it. So on this, quantum encryption is coming, quantum computing is coming, which will blow away all the encryption on all the data that's already encrypted out there. So if you have data that's encrypted the old ways, you need to assume now that, as you say, when we get to Q-Day, shortly after that, all of that's going to be public. And build your response and security around that. right? I know what people are meaning by quantum proof encryption that you could use today, and that's a good start. But to be clear, that will not keep your secret forever. They will keep them secret longer. So this is, I mean, I don't want to downplay this. This is a big change. People really need to think about this, but it's not new. The flaw is by thinking that since we encrypted it, since we put it in a bank vault, it is safe forever. It is not. Secrecy is on a time frame always. You have to think about that in advance, or get ready to be surprised at times like this.
Oh, Guy, do we need to change the tenor of the conversation around this? Because I think it's too technical, maybe, and maybe we need to go back to business leaders and say, hey, people are hoarding your encrypted data out there, and they're gonna expose it to the world in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, shall we say? And then do business people get more concerned then because they're assuming that encrypted data is gonna be secure forever?
No, they don't get more concerned. Uh, how long have we been having this conversation? The thing that has a low probability of happening, I would say a 1% probability is a high probability. Let's go with 1% per year. Shoot, I could kick that can for a while. This is only going to happen to me once every 100 years. Why do I need to worry about this? And we keep hoping or thinking that some big breach or some big problem, shared data or possibly if a company of sufficient size goes completely under as a result of a breach, that might be enough of a warning sign. But otherwise, I don't know if the average human mind, and by average it's a bad, I don't know how to put this, the typical human mind. I don't know if the typical human mind is able to process just this simple, I don't even want to call it nuance. Chris's perspective is perfect, which is to say, it's not really whether you can be breached, it's how long it will take. That's really simple. Frankly, that is simple. But the human mind does not tend to work that way. The human mind works with it is either safe or it is unsafe. And when an expert is providing, a little bit of color on the safe, oh yeah, it's safe in the sense that it would take 10 years instead of take 1 year or take 10 seconds or whatever it is. That I don't think business leaders in general, some do, but I think for the most part, they don't think that way. I don't think decisions are made that way. I think that is the fundamental problem with security, which is that it is a perpetual fight that you should measure in terms of, a scale, not in terms of is or is not. And that's just too difficult to grok when what you want to do is make your next bonus and have a happier Christmas.
I think there's an actual business value to, like you're saying, Guy, to thinking this through, right? Because maybe it's just those of us who've done security for a long, long time get this feeling, but I see it, and as a business person myself, I'm an executive and I make business decisions. And if I have this idea saying, okay, I can lock this away forever and move on, it leads me to a certain path. If I say, all right, I can lock this down for a while, and my competitors are going to find out and they're going to get it, and I have to be planning for that in advance. It keeps me agile. I'm always moving forward. I'm not receiving laurels. So, and again, I feel very strongly about both these things. So maybe I'm downplaying it. As somebody who advises a lot of people about security, you always take it, whatever you want to do, that's what you want to do, and that's fine. And I'll help you do that. But I think it's more than just a security risk. I think it's a business risk. If you think your business is going to be stable, your world's going to be stable because you can keep things as they are for a long time, you're probably just wrong.
So, I followed this since NIST, along with industry participation, came out with the first quantum proof algorithms for digital certificates, etc. I think there's a very simple explanation for this. Most people don't believe Q Day's coming anytime soon. A lesson we've learned in security, and I've learned this over 30 years, is it's just-in-time security. No one wants to be taking security precautions prematurely, number one. Number two, I think this problem will take care of itself because what's going on in our world is that certificates are being set to expire much more frequently. Like you don't buy a certificate and it's good for 5 years. As a matter of fact, Google is trying to make it that I believe every certificate needs to be renewed every 90 days. And when, the fact of the matter is these certificates, there's 3 or 4 companies that control 99% of the digital certificates out there. DigiCert's one of them. What they already are building in the quantum proof algorithms into their newer digital certificates. So when you upgrade to a new certificate, you get the quantum proof algorithm with it. So I think this is a great way this survey is a great way for us to cover it in the media and make people aware that Q Day is coming. But this is no Y2K. And I say that with all seriousness. But this is no Y2K. And I think it's a situation that'll be resolved. I should mention that DigiCert has an upcoming Quantum Readiness Day, as they did last year. And I am a judge for their best use of quantum hackathon type of thing that they do. So I am, I guess, conflicted, or at least I'm disclosing. That's the way it is in the country now, right? If I say and put it out in the open, I'm allowed to take money and everything. So I'm letting everyone know.
But Mike, what do you even you've been writing, and you and I've been writing and discussing this, for a long time, 25 years, whatever it is. And it seems to me that back in the day, we were seeing that was before a lot of the themes we see these days around, like the human side of security and social engineering, that sort of stuff. Those terms came along, but back then, more or less in the beginning, it's the same as today. I don't really see any difference. There's discussion out there. There's security vendors trying to raise the salience of the danger. They're making their sales and they're making money, but the general culture is one of wait and react. And I just do not see that having changed at all.
I think that there's 2 other factors at play here. One is, so if you're talking about, 3-year window, maybe 5, the probability that you're going to upgrade your IT infrastructure to something that has these algorithms built into it so it's crypto safe is pretty good. So I think, there'll be a lot of folks upgrading infrastructure and moving applications. And I think the building of applications and the replacement of legacy applications will accelerate in the age of AI. So I'm not saying all these apps will go away, but I'm saying that the level of risk might be smaller because the pace of modernization is going to be faster. So, but I don't think that has anything to do with security as much as better security is a byproduct of those 2 events. Would you follow me?
Well, since I went into applied philosophy with my last comment, let me take this one to 11, because I think the very idea that you're going to, keep things secret forever, it leads to bad business processes, right? And if you, call me a Boy Scout if you will, but there was one. If you, as a business and a person, whatever function we're talking about, you operate with the idea that people are going to find out. Whatever you're doing, whatever you say, they will find out. It gets harder to justify the idea that, no, don't tell anybody. We'll keep this amongst us. Because that has worked for all of human history. It works, the people who take advantage of things, criminals and dictators and so forth, manage to keep secrets long enough. If you accept the idea that you can, yes, manage your privacy and you can keep, your competitive advantages, behind the veil long enough to do whatever you want, but it will all come out. It kind of just logically works a lot of potentially corrupting influences out of business processes. And again, you may be able to capitalize sometimes on corrupt processes and actually, get the golden ring, but it's not a good plan. It's not repeatable. It's not consistent. So I think that the very idea, and I think in the digital age, maybe we're calling out this historical flaw because we have business people saying, all right, you're the security people, tell me how to be perfectly secure forever. It's like, keep it secret forever. You cannot. Stop trying to. It's bad for you.
There's a lot of people already using various messaging apps out there to have meetings they probably should not have because they're thinking that it's secure. So I'm looking forward to, if Q Day does come, there's going to be a lot of disclosures of things that we thought were one way 4 or 5 years ago that it turns out are not so. And maybe, it'll affect business leaders, but it will most certainly affect government leaders when, things that they thought that were state secrets are now being readily shared on the front page of your whatever favorite news site is.
Yeah, and I do want to make one stupid prediction, which is that there will be several effects of Q Day that we can't even see right now. That even doing white hat work or something that is just escaping us, dangers or possibly benefits. That I think there's something very unpredictable about such a huge change in security. However much we are anticipating it now, and the easy, quick breaking of keys, there's going to be other effects and side effects. We have no idea.
And the awesome thing about AI is the amount of time it will take to sort through all that data we've decrypted will be, now measured in minutes too. So
There's a classic novel out there that plays really well into this. I sort of wonder, I always wonder about this one, Shockwave Rider by John Bruton. It is Stand on Zanzibar and one of other books that were a lot more popular. But Shockwave Rider is exactly what, what happens if all the secrets become public all at once. Maybe that's not a bad thing. We may find out.
Guys, we need to pull a plug on this one. I'm sorry we're out our time, but excellent conversation. Chris, we're looking forward to hearing more about what you're up to. Maybe next time. Guy, as always, it's a pleasure to see you. Mike, go Yankees. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Stay tuned for the rest of our Techstrong TV schedule. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang.